So I've been getting a lot of questions about why I decided to start this YouTube channel. In today's video, I'd like to give you some insight into that very question. I'm going to break down my experiences with money into 4 distinct phases. Within each of these phases, I'll offer some examples and I'll give you some lessons learned along the way in the hope that you can take these lessons and avoid making these same mistakes yourself. My key aim here is to make you think more critically about money in general. Think critically about the beliefs that you hold. Think critically about the ideas you have to get to financial independence. So the first phase I want to describe is from birth until roughly 18 years of age. I like to call this phase the curiosity phase. This is where you learn everything you know about money. You're very impressionable during these years, and you're often exposed to a number of role models. From these individuals, you pick up all sorts of subtle cues about what an appropriate relationship with money looks like. I can give you an example in my life. My parents were both public educators. The topic of money was completely taboo. So we never talked about money. My dad balanced his checkbook every Sunday. He paid the bills, and both of my parents contributed to the financial well-being of the family. As kids, we never asked questions. We just knew that food was available, shelter was available, and that the jobs that my parents had allowed us to live this lifestyle. I also had this deep down sense of wanting to save every penny I made. Every dollar that I got from allowances or side jobs, I put away into a secret hiding place and I never touched. I always had a vision of wanting to buy something, and this thing changed throughout the years, and it got incrementally larger as I made more and more money. The second phase is the phase that is defined roughly from years 18 until around 30 years old. I like to call this phase the hard lessons learned phase. This is the time where you start learning a lot of the ideas that you had in phase 1 are actually not true. They're not true at all, not even remotely so. And this challenges your entire belief system. Some people react differently to this type of challenge by shutting down and not addressing these thoughts around money. Other people dive into it and have a full-blown crisis around these ideas. Other people continue to ignore the signs and signals that they're seeing around money and don't really establish a new relationship with money or take the time to learn these lessons as they're presented to you. A couple of lessons that I learned during this time. The very first was when I first invested in the stock market for the first time. This was a tough lesson. My understanding going into this investment was that the stock market always goes up. Of course, I had lived through some interesting times like the dot-com bubble, but things still recovered and things still went up. So I went forward knowing simply that you take any money that you have, you invest that money, and it goes up into the right. I somehow managed to get myself involved with a financial advisor, not a fiduciary. A fiduciary has a responsibility to advise you as best as they can to meet the goals that you establish. This individual did not have that constraint and could therefore sell me products that would advantage his personal situation. Well, that's exactly what happened. This individual advised me to go into 3 mutual funds, of which he got a cut for getting me into the funds. There was also a management percentage that I paid annually to have the benefit of this advice, which was another cut right off the top. Fast forward 20 years later, this initial investment I left in for the long term, and I lost about 75% of my initial investment value. This is incredible if you look at a 20-year trajectory. Even just keeping at the same principal amount of $10,000, which was the initial investment, that would have been a horrible return over 20 years. I actually was closer to $2,500 at the end, taking the losses and also taking a great lesson. Okay, so let's jump into the third phase. This is the phase that I like to call the relearning phase. My main mission during these years, and for everyone, this phase can be different. It can be a long period of time, it can be a short period of time, but I took a real hard critical look at my money value system, my belief system, and I tried to create a new mental map around money. What exactly are my core beliefs around money? This relates to a video previously posted about defining your fears with money and defining your financial vision with money. In order to create clear goals about where you want to go, you need to understand what your vision is, and you also need to understand what drives you forward. Fears often can provide this propellant and are very powerful to define clearly so that you have some sort of motivation as you move towards your financial vision. In this phase, I started rereading all the books that I had read in my earlier years. I also started to read new books, read new philosophies, and I spent a lot more time diving into what financial independence is. You need to rebrand and rewire how your brain perceives the future, which is exactly what I did. For me, this phase lasted around 3 years. When I turned 33, I was ready to move aggressively towards financial independence, and I had a strong mental map and some of the knowledge that I needed to get there. Certainly not all of the knowledge, but I had a good foundation to build upon. The final phase is what I call the implementation phase for your financial independence vision. This also can take a certain amount of time, but it's different for every individual. So don't be too hard on yourself if your financial implementation period is much longer. In my case, it was about 5 years of hard work and sticking to a plan before I realized financial independence in my life. One final point about these 4 phases, I want to emphasize that there is a feedback loop here. The feedback loop is really to include phases 2, 3, and 4. In phase 2, you learn lessons. In phase 3, you relearn how you understand basic principles and values. And in phase 4, you implement. These 3 phases are iterative and they never stop. You can plan to continue to do all 3 of these phases throughout the entirety of your life. I am often finding myself learning new lessons, and so always be open to growth and learning. That is the most important thing that I can impart upon you today, is that growth and learning are instrumental in your financial success. Couple that with the ability to think critically about problems that arise, about philosophies that are shared with you, and about the goals that you articulate for yourself and your future financial vision, and you have a complete package in order to find success in the future. So never forget, think critically, be open to growth and learning, and continue to check back on this channel where we're going to be offering different pieces of advice and systems to help you get there. Practical application is extremely important, but having a good sense of where your mental state is and what your knowledge is, where your limitations lie, and where your growth opportunities are is completely critical. Thanks a lot for joining today. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.